We opened the barn in June. And sometime along in there, I offered to resign to the board because I felt like we're getting our butts kicked, and I'm like, maybe I can't do this. Maybe this is too much for me. And so slowly over time, I was able to bring in people that overcome my shortcomings, that bring in skills that I didn't have, and I thought complemented well. And so it just slowly happened over time. And got to a point, it probably took a year and a half, 2 years before I really felt like, okay, I kind of got my arms wrapped around this thing. I kind of feel okay with what we're doing, but still, even to this day, I still feel like, man, we can do a lot better.
This episode is powered by NEDAP. NEDAP is future-proofing dairy farms by revolutionizing cow-side care through technologies and activity monitoring, cow locating, milk metering, and identification.
Welcome to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. I'm your host, Peggy Coffeen, and it is my pleasure to be here today with Greg Bethard, CEO of High Plains Ponderosa Dairy. And so you're here all the way from Plains, Kansas, and we are actually sitting down here in Green Bay at the Packers Stadium of all places, Lambeau Field, where you'll be speaking today to the Alltech Dairy School. But I've been able to corner you for a little time here, Greg, today, because I have been wanting for a very long time to tap in to your brain and your mindset and your story of how you got into the dairy industry in a little bit untraditional way, and also some of the things that you have learned along the way as a CEO in this industry.
Okay.
And so with that, Greg, first of all, welcome to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to sit down with you. And so let's start off here. So you did not come from a dairy farm.
No.
In fact, you came far away from dairy farms.
Correct.
From New Jersey?
Yeah, so I grew up in New Jersey, which I always joke is not the dairy state in the U.S. But what my interest has always been agriculture. My dad was a school principal. My mom was a 4-H agent. And my dad had a hobby farm. A lot of kids do, I don't know what they do with their dads for fun, go play baseball or whatever it is. My dad liked the farm. So I grew up as that was a fun weekend activity where I got to spend time with my dad. So I've always loved ag. I wasn't in dairy when I was little. My dad bought his hobby farm, had an old dairy barn. And he said, hey, you can do whatever you want in the barn. So I had veal calves. I showed dairy calves a little bit. I had pigs. I had beef cows. So I raised all these animals and sold them. And I just loved it. So for me, agriculture is all I ever wanted to do. And I've never had a job in anything but agriculture. And so that love of agriculture I really got from my dad. And I didn't have any farm to be handed down to me or anything like that. So I was able to kind of pursue whatever I wanted to pursue. And for me, it was always agriculture.
So when you look back at that time as a kid growing up and spending those weekends with your dad at the hobby farm, you talked about having some experience with animals and getting to do some showing and just raising cattle. And so I'm curious for you, when you look back, what was it about being on the farm that really you enjoyed?
I liked the work. I really always enjoyed the work, but I liked making money. I really did. And so I showed 4-H heifers for a couple of years and stopped because where I grew up in New Jersey, there was no way to make money at it. So I would get the calf from a local dairy farmer in the spring, and I'd feed it out of my own pocket for 2-3 months and then show it in August at the show and then bring it back to him. Right. And so I made no money. In fact, it cost me money. And then I started raising pigs and beef cows, and I could sell them at the end to make money. So I was like, I kind of like that a lot better. So what I started was a little business of selling packaged meat to neighbors. I was a suburban area. Where I grew up was halfway between New York and Philadelphia. So it was still an ag area at that time. This is in the late 70s, early 80s. There was still a lot of small farms, but it was suburbia. Basically, the cities were growing out. So there was lots of housing development. So I would sell half a hog or half a veal calf or half a beef and just freezer beef. And sometimes it was quarters, but I just go up in the developments and knock on doors and say, and people were very interested. So my dad was great for him because I made all this money selling all these animals and whatnot, or selling the meat. And that was what paid for a good part of my college. And we didn't pay taxes on any of it, right? I got all the money as a kid. And so when I was 12 years old, I had a bank account, a checkbook, and a credit card because I needed to buy feed and do all this other stuff. So, and my mom taught me how to write checks out, how to balance a checkbook, and how to manage a credit card and all that stuff. So I just loved every bit of that. I mean, it was never work to me. I never really called it, work is almost like something you don't want to do for a lot of people. And I just always liked it. So that's why I just always continued doing that, because it's what I wanted to do.
And so you really opened up this direct marketing business, this direct to consumer marketing business before it was ever what we see today.
I wouldn't business is probably too strong of a word. I was just a 12-year-old kid just selling
with a checkbook and a credit card. That's a business.
Yeah, but I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I remember when I first got pigs, I decided I wanted to have I was buying feeder pigs, and I decided, why don't I just get a sow and have the pigs myself? That'd make more money. So I bought a sow, and I didn't have any idea what I was doing. We didn't have a vet. I didn't even know what a vet was. My parents were not animal people. So my mom, being a 4-H agent, got me a book. She worked for Rutgers University, technically. She was on campus, and she got me a swine production textbook, like a college textbook. So I get this book, and in there were instructions how to castrate a pig. So I'm literally up there. It's like I'm reading the book, and I've got the knife in my hand, and I've got these letters. That's how I learned how to castrate pigs, just by following the instructions in the book and doing it. So that's what was so fun. Everything I did, I figured out, and my parents were so supportive. They gave me everything I needed. They supported me, and just gave me the opportunity. That's the biggest thing. Just gave me the opportunity. So it was a great learning experience. I loved it.
Wow. Okay. So you grew up in New Jersey, but had this experience and this side hustle you developed as a very young man with livestock and direct marketing and teaching yourself along the way these animal husbandry skills by a little bit of knowledge from some books and a little bit of just trial error, getting out and doing the thing. And so at a certain point in time, you got to choose the path you wanted to take for your career. And so what was the first step on that path?
So my older brother really was into dairy, and he ended up being a dairy farmer for a while. He's not anymore, but out of college he was. So he went to Virginia Tech for dairy science. He went there, so as a younger brother, I'd see my older brother, I'd go to campus, and I kind of liked that. So for me, I was like, I really like Virginia Tech. And so I went down there to look, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to be dairy or animal science. It was one of the two, because at that time, Virginia Tech had a separate dairy science department and a separate animal science department. So I remember going to the animal science department head office, and in those days there'd be a clipboard on the wall with all the jobs available. And so I take the clipboard off the wall and I'm paging through the jobs looking. I was like, well, it looks interesting, whatever. So then I went to the dairy science department and I looked at and there was like hundreds of jobs, and I'm looking, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is unreal. There was all kinds of interesting jobs. And I was like, man, the dairy industry is where I want to go. There's just way more career opportunities. Because again, I didn't have a farm to go back to, so I needed to have an industry to work in. I think I absolutely made the right decision. I mean, dairy, there's so many opportunities in our industry, and there are to this day. So that's why I chose it, just as simple as that.
Wow. So one of the trends I'm already starting to see in this conversation, Greg, is your ability to assess opportunity and to pursue it.
Yeah, that makes it sound like I really knew what I was doing, and I did. It's just, you just look at things, and I've always been a believer in opportunities. All the steps I've had in my career, I never planned it out. I never be like, oh, I'm going to do this. Something comes along, it's like, that looks interesting. I think I'd like to do that. And for me, it's never been about money. Every opportunity I've ever pursued has been about, I really want to do that. And that's been my guiding principle, because I've always felt like if I do something I really want to do, I'm likely to do it well, or do it better than something I don't want to do, and I'll be successful at it. I've never had to do a job that I don't like. I don't know what that's like to go to work every day and like, gosh, I really don't like what I'm doing. That'd be awful. And I've been really fortunate. I've never had that.
So what did those steps look like as you officially got into your career in the dairy industry?
Yeah, so initially, when I was a dairy science major, probably my sophomore year, Dr. Bob James was my advisor for all my degrees, and other than my dad, the biggest mentor in my life. I remember coming into his office sophomore year and saying, Dr. James, I don't think I should be in dairy science. I'm the only kid here that didn't come from a dairy. All my classmates came from a dairy. And, he straightened me out and basically said, that's nonsense. You don't have to be from a dairy to be here. So fortunately, he guided me in the right direction. So I continued on that. And then when I got done undergrad, I decided I'm never going back to school. I've had enough of school. I really wasn't a very good student, and just barely got through. And I was like, well, so I'll go out in the world. So I managed a feed mill. I went back to New Jersey, managed a feed mill, and then about a year into it, Dr. James calls and says, hey, I've got a assistantship open for a master's student. Are you interested in coming? And my future wife was still an undergrad at the time, so she wanted me to come back, and I was like, Dr. James, I was not a good undergraduate student. What makes you think I'm going to be a good graduate student? And he's like, I think this is right for you, and he just convinced me that it was the right opportunity for me. So I went down, and as it turns out, I loved graduate school. I was on assistantship, so I literally got paid to learn. I mean, how cool is that? You're just paid to learn. You know, like I remember my first project that I had to do. And so I had these different concoctions of different protein sources to try and manipulate amino acid profile back in the days before we could feed amino acids and just see if I could get better growth on the animals. So yeah, it was fun. It was, like I said, it was my project and it was great.
So was there any piece or part of that project that kind of went on to set up more research or advancements?
No, none of the research I did really changed much of anything. It was not, that's why I'm not a researcher today. And my PhD project was a microcomputer simulation of the heifer enterprise. So I got, I've always liked business. And so it enabled me to take all I learned about biology and growth of animals and then build a computer simulation to create and generate herds of animals and say, what happens if we get an animal bred sooner? What happens if we can make them grow faster? What's the economic impact to the dairy of that? So I tracked the animals all the way through first lactation. So again, it was not any game-changing research, but I learned a heck of a lot. I learned a lot of skills, changed my life. Just absolutely changed my life.
Wow. So this really set you on the course of kind of the excitement and enjoyment for learning and for pursuing those opportunities that came your way. And when you talk about that that project that you did looking at economic impact of heifers and the factors that could affect that, was there a lot of other research at that time done on that topic, or was that
really
kind of early?
Computer simulations weren't really in vogue that much yet, and so basically I just built it on a spreadsheet and had tons of macros in it, and so I'd start the spreadsheet and it would generate a herd of 1,000 heifers and then take them all the way through first lactation, and then you'd collect the outcomes for it. So what I basically did was took a lot of research that had been done on biology, because I had to have equations to predict everything that happened to the animal, how much she ate, how well she grew, reproductive success or failure, and all that. I just would grab data. So I got to read lots and lots of papers from the 60s and 70s that, old USDA articles, all kinds of really intriguing basic heifer work.
So how did that experience set you up for what happened next?
My first job out of graduate school I was a professor at New Mexico State University. So that, you couldn't do that without having a degree. So and I was there for about a year and realized that being a university professor probably wasn't for me. And so after that, I ended up going to Monsanto dairy business and moved on in my career. But, graduate school was a foundation for everything for me. I mean, I just can't emphasize how much that 5 years in graduate school changed me as a person and really set my career path, because again, there's nothing particular I learned that I applied. It's the process. Like I remember my dad was an educator, so in my freshman year, I remember calling my dad in college and saying, like, I don't think this college thing is for me. I'm studying for these tests, and they give me all this material, and then I spit it back on an exam, and then 2 weeks later, I forget most of it. So what's the point? And my dad's like, well, the point is you're learning how to learn. You're not there to learn facts and figures. You're there to learn how to learn. So whenever you're done college and you go off in your career, if you have the skill of knowing how to learn, that's going to come in really handy, because you're going to have to learn all new stuff in whatever career you choose. And it turns out he was exactly right. So that's really what graduate school cemented for me, is how to learn.
If you really laid out all of the incredible people that are in the dairy industry today that are making some impacts, so many of them trace back to this Monsanto lineage.
Yep, absolutely.
So where were you located when you were part of that team?
Yeah, so I, as I said, I went to New Mexico State for a year, and then Monsanto offered me a job back east. And my wife and I, we were pregnant with our daughter at that time. We decided, we kind of like our daughter to grow up around family. My family is back east, so all that fit. And then for me, I was a complete nobody. I knew nothing. I didn't have any experience. I was like, man, to go join Monsanto, I'd get to rub elbows with all the legends as I saw them in the industry. And they were legends that I got to work with and learn from. So I moved back to Virginia, and I was a tech service person. So, had a kind of territory of the Southeast and kind of worked around the country quite a bit, but just an unbelievable experience. I met so many legends that became friends that were really lifelong mentors for me, and people that just really taught me everything. So I got exposed to some really, really high caliber people. And like you said, the people that kind of passed through Monsanto in those early days are phenomenal.
So who were some of your greatest mentors?
Yeah, so probably first and foremost would be Dr. Brian Perkins. He was a former private consultant, And that's kind of something I aspired to do, is to eventually get out of my own and try to feed cows myself. So I got to know Brian, and he was a legend in the industry. And man, he was just such a nice guy that helped me out in so many ways. So he was. Gene Boomer was another one that he just passed away here not too long ago. But Gene was just another guy that had a long history in the dairy industry, and really took me under his wing and taught me how to navigate corporate culture and how to interact with people, how to cold call on dairies. Like that, back in the BST days, some of the dairies you called on, they didn't want you there, right? So that was kind of hard for me. So Gene would coach me through that and how to do it. So then I got to know Gordy Jones, a legend. Gordy's just a phenomenal person, of course. And then Don Niles is another one. I got to know Don through. Don and Brian and I were in the same new hire class. And so, those guys were mid to late career. I was like a newbie, right in the beginning. So I just kind of got to latch onto their coat, so to speak, and kind of tag along and learn from them. So, but there were so many others. I mean, just like you said, you go on and on. I go to meetings now, and it's like the Monsanto Alumni Club. You look around and see there's just so many people.
So fast forward a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Today you are CEO and owner of a dairy.
Yep.
So what did it take to go from working corporate life in the dairy industry to doing what so many aspire to do?
Mm-hmm.
And that's become an owner of a dairy, but that's a big gap.
Yep. There was a dairy in Kansas that was a client of mine going back to like 2004, a long-term client, really good people, good family. I told John, it's like, let's go down to Kansas, because this client of mine, when I'd stopped consulting and to go to work for John, I told all my clients, like, hey, I'm taking a job as CFO at this dairy, blah, blah, blah. And I remember them saying, like, hey, if you guys, meaning me and whoever I went to work for, if you guys ever want to partner on a dairy or do something, come back and see us, because it was a really, really great family that were started the dairy and had had the dairy all those years, but they weren't dairymen by begin. They're ranchers and farmers, but not really dairymen. So they'd always hired a dairy manager to run the dairy and oversaw the business, but just a really, really good family. And I thought, like, this might be a really good pairing, that John and I could kind of bring the dairy into the ownership group, and they bring wisdom, business experience, farming, and all that. And that might kind of be a unique partnership. So we flew down and met, and lo and behold, we ended up forming a partnership. So John and I, and Don Niles was involved in that too. We went down to Kansas and partnered. It was kind of like my project. So John, hey, this is your deal, you oversee it and all that kind of stuff, but I had no intention of running it. So I was going to hire somebody to manage it, and I was going to stay in Wisconsin and continue to be CFO and kind of oversee the dairy in Kansas. So I tried to hire somebody and just couldn't find anybody. Kansas is, everybody always says, oh, nobody will go to Kansas, men go there and their wives divorce them and all this nonsense that isn't true. But there was all that rumor out there, that kind of stuff. So a lot of guys, and it happened to be guys I talked to, not gals at that time, interested in coming to running the dairy, most of their spouses, the guys would be interested. And then they call back 3 days like, nah, sorry, my family doesn't want to come. So for whatever reason. So I couldn't find anybody. So I was going back and forth from Wisconsin to Kansas and talking to my wife on the phone one day. And she's frustrated that I'm spending all this time in Kansas and she's in Wisconsin. And she just kind of blurted out like, well, maybe we ought to just move to Kansas. And then she's like, maybe I shouldn't have said that. So that's really what we ended up. So I went to John and I said, hey, I want to go to Kansas and run it. I can't find anybody to run it. I don't want to be flying back and forth every week. I just want to go down there. And I'd never run a dairy before. I had no idea what I was doing, right? I'd never run a dairy. And John's like, no, he's like, I want you here in Wisconsin. He said, I want you here in Wisconsin. I was like, John, I really want to go to Kansas. So this went on for a couple of weeks. And finally, to John's credit, he took Rachel and I out to dinner and he sat down with us. And he said, Greg, I can see where your passion is. He said, go pursue your passion. And so we started the dairy, and our idea was to grow. So we built a parlor, or we're in the process of building a parlor and a barn to add on to what they had. And that next February, John got killed in a plane crash. So it would have been February of 18. So at that point, John was really the leader of our group. He was the dairyman in the group, so he kind of led the charge and, with design and kind of the vision of the dairy and whatnot. And so suddenly John's out of the picture, and all of our other partners are not dairy. I'm the only dairy partner left, right? I'm the only partner that has dairy experience or dairy interest. I really didn't have experience, but interest. And so I just kind of became the managing partner. We're literally halfway through building the dairy. And people be like, oh, you guys going to stop? I'm like, hell no, we're not going to stop. We're going to keep going. John would be extremely disappointed if we just said, gosh, this is too hard without John. No. And so we continued on. And we opened the dairy up. It would have been in June of 18, and we promptly got our tails kicked in a very, very significant way. I mean, it was rough that first summer. I mean, things didn't go right. I mean, I really struggled that first year, but we eventually figured it out. And then we just kind of taken it from there. And I've grown as hopefully a leader of our dairy. I've grown and learned as we've gone. The best teacher absolutely is mistakes. And so I've learned a lot. We've made so many mistakes, and those mistakes, when they cost you money, you don't forget them. And so the education that I've got since being a dairyman far exceeds any other education I've ever got. And that's why I've loved it so much. So, we talked about graduate school before, how much I love that. That's why I love being a dairyman so much, because there's nothing dull about it. There's very little idle time. You're constantly challenged to do better. There's constant learning all the time, every day. That's what being a dairyman is. And that's why I like it so much. And so I've been doing this now I've been CEO and managing partner for, I guess, would be 7 years now. Wow. And it's been fantastic. And I intend to spend the rest of my career here doing this.
So 7 years that you've been in this spot. And it was a big shift, as you had mentioned, to go all in on being at the dairy, your own dairy full time versus your days as a consultant or working as a CFO. What was the hardest part of that period of time, that learning period?
The hardest part is learning, I guess, just trying to figure it out. I mean, it was just hard. I mean, there's a lot of days where I didn't know if I could figure it out. That first summer, would have been probably like July or August. We opened the barn in June. Sometime along in there, I offered to resign to the board because I felt like we're getting our butts kicked, and I'm like, maybe I can't do this. Maybe this is too much for me. And so slowly over time, I was able to bring in people that overcome my shortcomings, that bring in skills that I didn't have, and I thought complemented well. And so it just slowly happened over time. And got to a point, it probably took a year and a half, 2 years before I really felt like, okay, I kind of got my arms wrapped around this thing. I kind of feel okay with what we're doing, but still, even to this day, I still feel like, man, we can do a lot better. I can do a lot better. There's plenty of places to improve and get better on. And again, that's the attraction to the industry and to the job. It's just so much fun.
Yeah, it never changes. It never stops. The challenges continue to be there. And Greg, as you share what the journey has been like of being there at High Plains, and I just want to put this into some context, once again, for just the challenges of what that time must have been. You were building this dairy when John passed. So for one, there was a major loss of someone very close to you. There was building a dairy in a place that was foreign, so to speak. You'd been there, sure, but not lived there.
Right.
And now you are living in the place that no one else wants to move to. And just stepped up into a position of something that you'd never truly done day to day before.
Right.
So let's just put that out there of what that time period must have been like. And you said it was definitely challenging.
Yeah.
There were moments when you really questioned if you were in the right place.
Well, it's kind of like I said, when I was an undergrad and I thought dairy science wasn't for me, and I went in Dr. James's office and he said, nope, he straightened me out and gave me the confidence that, no, you can do this. You don't have to grow up in a dairy to be a dairy science student. Being an owner of the dairy made all the difference in the world because all my money was in the dairy. And so it would have been really easy that summer to say, I'm out of here. If it was just a paying job, I'm not saying I would have, but being an owner, that thought never crossed my mind. That I told you I offered to resign because I wanted the board not to be obligated, but I wasn't quitting. That's completely different, right? I wasn't going to quit because I was going to go down with the ship. And so that really impacted me going forward, that when I brought key people into our dairy, I wanted them also to be owners and have skin in the game. That whole first summer all these things kind of came together, all that struggle. And as we always know, you hear all the quotes from everybody that when you really struggle and figure something out, it just changes you, and it's such a great learning experience. I was fortunate to have all that. Without all that support of partners and other dairymen and all my colleagues at the dairy, all that support, I'd have never made it. There's no way. There's just no way.
Wow. So as you just mentioned, Greg, there were some people that really poured wisdom and support and encouragement into you at a time, like you said, when you were questioning if this was really the right place for you. Well, I want to turn the table a little bit and give you an opportunity to be on the other side of that.
Okay.
So now, 7 years into being a dairy owner and CEO, and a lifetime career in the industry, what would be the 3 biggest lessons, kind of key pieces of advice that you would give to someone else specifically in the dairy business about leadership, business, success?
Yep. So, the things that mean a lot to me are what I said earlier about put your boots on and go to work. I think no matter what it is, you just got to work at it, and you've got to every day show up with your A games. I think getting yourself mentally and physically in a spot where you can really push yourself to succeed is important. The other thing I think is just look for opportunities. That this industry has so many opportunities. I remember Kirby Clausen, who's the kind of the patriarch of the family that started the dairy back in 2000. I'm a kid from New Jersey and Virginia coming out to Kansas, and it's like, holy cats. And like, God, there's nothing out here. I mean, because there's no people. There's nothing out here. And Kirby's like, you just got to look. He said, there's opportunity everywhere you look. You just got to look. And I'm thinking to myself, look, there's nothing here to see. And it took me time to realize that he's exactly right. There is opportunity everywhere. And the dairy industry is that way. There's opportunity everywhere. You don't have to be a dairy farmer, right? That's what I've chosen to do, and I'm very happy with that choice. But I was a consultant for 15 years. I was in academia for a bit. I was worked for Monsanto and in corporate America. So I've worked in all these different segments of the dairy industry, and there's phenomenal opportunities in everywhere. So when occasionally I'm in a position to give advice to a younger person, and that's I always say about, like I said, about money, is that don't focus on the money as the choice for your job. Choose one that you're going to learn the most, because if you learn more, that's going to put you in better position for the next job, because whatever job you take now, you're likely not going to be doing that in 5 years. You're likely going to be on to something else. So choose one where you're going to learn the most. Don't choose the job that's where you want to live or delivers the most money or those sorts of things. Choose the job that enables you to learn the most and the one that you're going to like the most, because I think that's going to ultimately lead to success. I've been able to bring in people that like that kind of culture. Not everybody does. There's some people that look at that and say, I don't want any part of that. I want something a lot more structured, where I know what I got to do and when I got to do it. And that's just not my way of doing things. I'd rather just leave it a little more open, put some guidelines around it, and let people pursue their own passions and go down the road they really want to go. And people that like that kind of culture have been attracted to our business. And the people I've brought in not only bought into that culture, they're creating it too.
Yeah, when you really think about the greatest, wins or successes of this journey of being CEO and being a dairyman, what are a couple of the things that really stand out in your mind?
Probably first and foremost is the people. There's a number of people on our team that came to us without a lot of experience or a lot of background, and just the way they blossomed and grown is amazing. That's probably been more than anything. Then the other thing is achieving business success. I think financially our business has been successful, not as successful as it should be or will be, but I think we've been successful enough. We've been able to keep growing. And so I really, to me, the dairy business is first and foremost a business. I love cows, I love agriculture, but we talk about sustainability, as everybody's using that word everywhere. And another good dairy friend of mine that's a legend in the industry used the word to me, infinite, instead of sustainable. And I was like, what do you mean by that? He's like, well, he said, we like to think of our business as infinite, meaning we want to be here in the future. So I really embraced that. And so I to me, look at our business as being infinite, in that every decision I make, I would like our dairy to be here in 50 years. I won't be here for it, but the next person or families will. And so I think to be infinite meaning be here long term, we've got to first and foremost be profitable. That's number one. If we're not profitable, we're not infinite. And so the opposite of infinite would be finite, right? So there's nothing bad about being finite. We're thinking of ours as infinite. So everything I build now from a facility standpoint, I'm thinking 30 to 40 years. It's got to last. So we're designing stuff and have that thought process in there. So again, to be infinite, first of all, we got to be profitable. Then I think there's 4 things we got to take care of. We got to take care of the cows. We got to take care of our people. We got to take care of our community, and we got to take care of the environment. If we can do all those 4 things and be profitable, we can truly be an infinite business. And that's really what our goal is.
The infinite business model. And so you mentioned 4 pillars of that, right? Mm-hmm. Cows, people, community, and environment.
Yes.
And you're looking at this on a 50-year timeline. What must happen in the way that you care for cows in the next 50 years?
Yep. So, that's the great thing about Monsanto. We talked about Monsanto earlier. Monsanto changed the industry. Because I remember in the 90s, just going to dairies and seeing beat up cows and terrible facilities. And it's not that nobody cared. I just don't think nobody knew what to do. There just wasn't the materials and education. And Monsanto came in there and astutely realized, like, hey, if these cows aren't comfortable, they're not going to respond well to BST. And we're probably not going to have a lot of customers. So if we can help dairy farmers make conditions better for cows, they're likely to respond better to BST, and we have long-term customers. So, but they put together an enormous amount, probably Gordy Jones more than anybody, I'd say, really got the cow comfort thing, changed our industry. That cow comfort thing, it's never a done deal. It's never like, oh, our cows are comfortable, we're good forever. So I think we're always trying to improve it. I don't know what the next innovations will be. That's an interesting question. Yeah, I'm hoping that those innovations are not forced on us. I hope they're industry driven, because I've worked in Europe for a long time, and all of theirs are now forced on them. And I think it's better if we do it for ourselves, because I've always told people that are non-dairy people that the beauty of the dairy industry is we've got every financial incentive to treat the cow right? More than any other livestock industry. The better we treat our cows, the more they return to us. So we've got every incentive, so just let us do it. And I think the incentives are there in better performance of the cows, that every one of us is trying to do that. So, we happen to build cross-ventilated barns, because in our part of the world, the climate that we have, they suit our climate really well. They don't suit every climate. They're certainly not as good in certain parts of the country. We think the cow's happier, more productive. And so how are we gonna evolve that down the road? I think we're gonna learn how to manage the environment better inside those barns, because we still struggle with heat stress. Right? And it gets hot in the summertime, and cows' Achilles heel really environmentally is heat. They just don't like hot weather and don't do well. So from a cow standpoint, that's where I see us going. I think we can keep cows pretty comfortable in a lot of other ways, but the heat stress is the one thing. Yeah, someday I want to see our dairy, or our pregnancy rates, our milk production, everything is just, you can't tell what month it is, right? You look at the numbers, gee, is that August or is that December? Not really sure. That's my goal for us someday, to get to that, where you really can't see seasonality in the business. Right now, you can absolutely see seasonality in the business, and that means cows are not doing well. They're under stress.
So that's the vision in your mind when you think of what that looks like as something that will influence the infinite piece of the cow picture. And it sounds like a future podcast, Greg, when you have this some of these ideas fleshed out on how to do that environmentally in the cow's environment. So what about on the people side?
So again, those kind of 4 pillars that I have, if you will, the people, this is a people business. We all know that. So it's a cow people, it's a people business, both, or cow business, and a people business. And so the people part of it is just everything. I mean, it's just, we cannot run our business and be successful without people. So that's back to that culture thing. I really think culture needs to be deliberate. And I think it needs to be defined. I had one person one time come to me and basically try to sell me on a culture. Like, here's a document, here's a culture. And I'm thinking, like, this is the craziest thing in the world. You just can't give somebody culture and say, here, adapt this. It's got to come from within. It's got to be what works for you and what you're passionate about. And because I can tell you what, if your culture is phony, it's people recognize it in 2 seconds, I believe. Anything that's not genuine, people pick up on. And then once it's phony and not genuine, people, they're not buying in at all. Just absolutely not, in my opinion. Just, you'll never get buy-in. So it's got to be genuine. It's got to be a single source of leading the culture for the business, and it's got to be genuine. And I think if you have all that, you can really create a culture where people want to be part of it.
So that's what it's going to take to have that infinite opportunity for the people.
Yes.
And how about community and environment?
Yeah.
Talk about those two pieces.
Yeah, so community to me for a dairy farm is everything. And talk to any dairy farmer, they know very well that they impact their neighbors because we're spreading manure. There's odors that come off a dairy. I happen to like the smell of a dairy, but not everybody does. And you're driving vehicles up and down the road. You've got milk trucks. You've got, during harvest, you're running trucks up and down the road. You've got equipment running everywhere. So you're really engaging and impacting the community on a regular basis. So if your community is not happy with you, it's not going to be an easy road. In our community, like, we make sure that we buy everything local that we can. I always tell people that a dairy farm, most of our money stays in the community. A lot of businesses, that's not true. So the economic multiplier of dairy is quite good, that money stays in the community and is spent and turned over. So dairies, I think, are really good for communities because it means more jobs, not just people working for the dairy, but all the people that a dairy needs to help to get things going, electricians and plumbers, and the list goes on and on of all the support people we got to have. And so I think if we can do all those things and treat our community well and contribute to our community, not contribute, then our community is going to embrace us and say, hey, you're part of our community. And then sometimes when issues come up, and what happened on a dairy, say something happens on a road or whatever, and somebody gets upset, they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt if they know you're a contributing member of the community. So again, we're so engaged with our community in everything we do that if we don't have good relations and don't have the support of our community, eventually there's going to be problems that are going to really hurt our business. So that's why I think the community piece is so important. And then the environment's everything. We're in an area of the world where there's not a lot of water. And so we need to absolutely protect our water. And that is probably an easy example of seeing the infinite mindset, is that we're trying very hard to make our water last. And we feel very strongly it will, but we're doing things like trying to feed our cows differently, using forages that use less water, making sure that we don't waste water in any way. And so we're definitely strategically trying to use the water resources we have to make it last 100 years and not use it up in 10 years, right? We couldn't have the mindset like, well, we're just going to pump or dry. We're just going to suck out all we can, and then we'll move on to someplace else. And some people or some dairies, that's kind of the mindset, I think, in other areas of the country. But ours is definitely, so that's one example. But then also like spreading manure on the ground. We don't want to load our soils up with phosphorus so that in 10 years there's so much phosphorus in the soils we can't spread manure anymore. We just can't do that, right? We've got to make sure we appropriately apply nutrients to our soils so that we don't overload them, so that we can continue to do that. So I think agronomically and the water issue, all that environmentally is critical, because if we lose any of those pieces, we're out of business. We run out of water. If we got no place to spread manure, if we got neighbors that don't want us there, any of those things, we're no longer infinite. We're out of business.
Yeah. So as you just mentioned, there are risk factors. There are things that could impact this grander vision of the infinite operation. What do you identify as the greatest risk to the future of your business?
Probably for me, the number one risk is an activist coming on site and taking a video. Every dairy has probably things that happen on the dairy that they're not proud of. Every business is that way, not just dairy. And unfortunately, in our social media age and all this other stuff, if a bad video shows up on a dairy, you could lose your milk contract. You could be done. And so that to me is our number one threat and risk, is somebody coming on our dairy, either employed or otherwise, and getting video of something that we're not proud of and putting that on the internet and making us look really bad.
Yeah, and that is certainly a threat and a risk, and something that we've seen, unfortunately, happen.
Yes.
Happen over the years.
Yeah.
And so, as you look at that as a risk, what's the other opposite? The greatest opportunity?
The greatest opportunity is growth, I think, for us. There's so many ways to grow that doesn't involve milking more cows. There's all kinds of, just back to Kirby Clausen's thing of there's opportunity everywhere you look, and there is. And so that I think is our greatest opportunity, is the ability to grow and evolve our business.
Yeah. So you have shared a lot of insight in our conversation today, Greg. As we wrap up the time that we have together, and this is maybe more as a father, right? Like, you have a daughter that you mentioned you have a daughter. And when you think about, your legacy and lessons that you want to instill in her.
Mm-hmm.
If you could write her a letter
Mm-hmm.
and say, this is what I want you to know,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say?
My daughter works at our dairy now, and I didn't think dairy was exactly what she wanted to do. And I never wanted her to feel any obligation to come. In fact, I never even suggested that she come back. I knew too many people in our industry that were raised on a dairy, and it was almost a burden that they were expected to come back. The parents made it like, oh, my goal is to get my kids back in the dairy and bring them, make this a second, third, whatever generation farm and all that kind of stuff. And I'd see the kids and you could tell it's like, I'm not sure that that's what they want to do, and they never had the chance to decide, to say like, gee, this is really what I want to do. So I never wanted my daughter to feel any pressure that I expected her to come back, or that I would even be like elated if she came back, like, oh, this is my dream, having my daughter. I love having my daughter. I get to see her every day. I absolutely cherish it. But I'd be just as happy if she worked 5 miles down the road for somebody else and I got to see her. I just want to be part of her life, and I want her to be happy. If I could say something to her, it'd be work hard at what you do and give it your all, and do what you are passionate about and do what you like.
And is it maybe part of that too for her to be able to see opportunities and pursue them?
Yeah, absolutely.
In the way that you
Yes.
have, and that's excited you all
But I
these
think
years?
if she works hard and does something she's passionate about, the opportunities will be there. They're going to be there. But the basis of that is working hard, learning your craft well, and doing something you like. I think all that is the base that leads to the other. I think too often we focus on what's later and not focus on just here's what we got today. Here's what I can do today. And if we keep doing those things right, eventually those opportunities will come.
Wow. Well, I tell you, it has been so fun, Greg, to get to hear the stories and this path and the opportunities that you have worked really hard for, but then taken the action of stepping into, and where it's led you, but also the impact that it's had on the people around you, the people that are part of the team at High Plains, the people in the industry that have had that chance to interact with you over the years. And is there anything we missed? Like, this is your chance right here. Like, open mic with Greg. Like, what did we miss? What would you like to share?
Boy, we covered a lot of territory. I don't know if there's anything I missed. I just, to stress that, I've been very fortunate that I've been able to do what I've wanted to do. I'm at heart a very selfish person. I don't like doing things that I don't want to do. And anytime I've been engaged in something that I don't want to do, I quickly get out of it and move on to something else. So I've quit several things and I've moved on quickly because I don't like doing things that I don't want to do. So I've been very blessed that I've been able to find things that I really want to do. And so to me, that's the overwhelming thing of my whole story is I've just been really blessed with great mentors. I've had tremendous opportunities and I've enjoyed everything I've done. And I mean, how lucky is that? I'm just really fortunate that I can say that. And I still feel that way, that I really like what I do. I just think too many people don't have that opportunity to do something they really like.
Oh, excellent. Well, Greg, thank you so much.
No, thank you, Peggy.
Thank you for sharing
I
your experience and your knowledge and your wisdom and your story. And I know there are going to be pieces and parts of what you shared that will resonate with others in the industry that look at what you've been able to accomplish and where you're at. And we'll be grateful for a little bit of the insight of what's got you there. So thank you, Greg.
Good. Thank you.
This episode is part of the High Performance Mindset series powered by NEDAP. NEDAP is future-proofing dairy farms by revolutionizing cow-side care through technologies and activity monitoring, cow locating, milk metering, and identification.